Hello and welcome to the Ireland on the Fly podcast about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland. Now, it's summer, and while brown trout anglers might be taking a hiatus and salmon anglers complain of low rivers, these summer months are an opportunity to escape to the ocean in pursuit of a different type of silver, that of the sea bass. Jason O'Riordan is a well-known Dungarvan-based angler and guide with Mackenzie, who throws a fly at pretty much anything that swims, including bass, around the famous Copper Coast. And he joins us on this week's show to tell us more about the bass and how to catch them. But first, Tom, I wanted to talk to you about saltwater fishing. And is it something you've done, or is it done much of even around the Galway coast there?
Hi, Dara. Yeah. First off, no, it's something I've done very little of. I've only actually fly fished for bass once, and that was actually in the UK. It was in the Devon coast when I was over there. And it's about 15 years ago. Got a couple of schoolies and great fun. So I remember saying to myself, got to try this when I get home. But no, never got around to it. My problem is I'm very busy here in the summertime. And as you see, when we asked, that's one of the reasons I was, as you'll see from the interview, talking to Jason. I mean, when are the optimum months, particularly for bass? And unfortunately, there's too much of a clash there with when I'm busy. It was interesting though. You asked the Galway coast there. I remember chatting to a lad I know here, Johnny the Hat, who's good, well-known fly fisherman, but does lobster pots on the coast. And I remember him saying once to somebody else, they said, "Oh yeah, whenever I know the pots, I spotted bass in a couple of places." And I just, not thinking, just said, "Oh, Johnny, where?" And got a complete stonewall of an answer. And you can understand that. And like, I think we touched on that when we were talking to Jason, because they've become quite precious. I suppose the few have been overfished as well, which is what we were talking to him about. But that said, there isn't a lot of well-known bass marks around the Galway coast. I keep meaning to go with a good buddy of mine, Jackie Coyne, because Jackie does a fair bit of fishing off the rocks and off the beach back there for pollock. And now mainly with lures he's talking about, but he does go after the fly. So once again, it's what we'll have to call this something. We call it the economy bucket list, or I don't know what we call it, but anyway, it's on my local bucket list. Is to go back with Jackie and to do a bit of pollock on the fly.
Yeah. So, and where does he fit? You're saying off the rocks, like, is that, where's that, like Salt Hill?
Jackie lives back in on the way to Renville. It's called Mullaglass, Letterfrack, Tullycross. Back there, anybody who knows Lettergesh Beach, Glasgow Beach. Between the beaches, there's a load of rocks, and Jackie's house is there overlooking the Atlantic. Yeah, so, and he's always saying, "Oh no, it wouldn't be any good now. There was a storm a couple of days ago out, so the wash will be too much." And he's always looking for when it's just right to fish the rock. So yeah, hopefully I'll get back and give it a go.
I used to spend every summer in Galway when I was a kid. My mum's family is from there, outside Oranmore, like literally just on the bay there, like, and like the ocean, the Atlantic, you know, you'd be out in Connemara. I'm always struck by it's like it's an integral part of the Galway identity. But correct me if I'm wrong, but like most of the fishing I know of Connemara is all inland or close to, you know what I mean? That there doesn't seem to be that kind of more developed culture of fishing around shore angling, is there? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, no. And I personally think it's probably underdeveloped. I've gone a couple of times shore fishing with, remember Dougie, Scottish lad who used to be in Westport. And he used to be going on, you know, there's a potential here that is really untapped, very much untapped. And yeah, but I don't know. It's probably there's no big tradition of it.
It'll just take some hardy, obsessive angler, because this is my experience. A lot of these saltwater guys are that, you know, you have to put the time in terms of getting to know the mark.
Didn't that really come home, chatting to him? It really came home. My God, you know, you think, well, you know, there I was thinking a mark is one particular spot the size of this room that I'm talking to you. And no, you know, mark is quite a large area. And you just think, you know, you have to cover that walking, you know?
Yeah.
And then you have to cover it at different levels of tide, you know.
And different conditions. Wind,
yeah.
Everything like,
You know, the amount, and I can see what you're saying, how you'd have to be obsessive to get at it. But then you get it right, you reap the dividends.
Yeah. No, but there is something about the call of the ocean.
Yeah.
You know, I've done, now it's mainly lure fishing, done West Cork when I go down with the family. And yeah, there's just so, like, I write about it in my book. One of the bass fishings, one of my best ever bass, actually was my personal best, was night fishing and in the night surf with David Norman. And it's hard to just describe. You're standing there in the darkness of the surf.
Yeah.
And you can just imagine the pitch black of the night and the stars above you. And then you look down and you see the luminescence, you know, in the water.
Yeah.
And it's just mind blowing, like, you know, and then you're there every time you cast out and every time you're reeling in slowly. This could be a big one, you know, and you're just on tenterhooks and it's the night time. It's 2:00 in the morning and it's just.
What size was that bass?
I would love to. For some reason, I had 85 centimeters in my head, but I know that's wrong. David will correct me. He listens to this podcast. I know that's wrong. I think it was about 7.5, 8 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And it was just fabulous fish. Like, and again, what I loved again when he told me, and Jason gets into this in terms of the lifespan of the fish, you know, he must have been probably about 11, maybe 12 years old, maybe.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? It really is, yeah.
To think about it. So there's such a special resource. And as people have called, somebody has said to me before, you know, Ireland's a bit of a bass mecca. I think it's one of those kind of, we don't appreciate it.
Yeah.
You know, you have English anglers love coming over and, you know, and I think as well, they just think because it's quite underfished, you know, there's a lot of kind of different marks. You can find different spots. Like,
I think that's one of the reasons why it is, because it is underfished. I mean, basically from the level of population that we have here compared to the UK, you know, straight off with you know, probably half the amount of coastline, we've 10% of the population, you know.
So, exactly. Like,
you know,
but it is, I have to say though, it's like anything. I think if you want to get the most out of it, you know, wherever you're going, find a good guide, book him in, he'll take you out, because at least you get the most of it. Because I do that every time. If I'm going West Cork, Dungarvan, you know, it's not like I can just pop down to the river, you know. You have to make a trip of it, so make the most of it, you know. So look, I think people will get something out of this with Jason. You know, there's a lot of information, you know, how to, but I find it fascinating. And again, it's another branch, and you know, people might be interested this summer. It might be something different. It could be on holidays, you know. And again, it's just another fascinating area of fly fishing in Ireland. So let's hear from Jason just on bass fishing, especially around the Copper Coast.
You have more factors than you tend to deal with in a river or on a lake. Tides, tide variances, all sorts of stuff that you don't have to worry about normally with your other types of freshwater fishing. So a guy living on the coast, yeah, fine. You know, if you're living along the coast, it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Otherwise, you're going to have to put in a lot of time, even with a lure rod, and quiz a lot of people. And then you need to catch fish on the lures to get a bit of confidence. And then you have to remember as well, a lot of the lads who are into fly fishing don't want to go lure fishing. I mean, if you're fairly competent with a fly rod, it's almost seen as a step back. You know, you'll do it if you have to. It's too windy or the water's really coloured. But the one thing I have noticed, most of the guys who come to me now are fly guys, and they're fairly competent. You know, they're pretty decent at casting. Even the tourists, with a guy maybe 2 weeks ago from Florida, has his own flats boat, well able to double haul, you know. So a guy like that, you know, he even with a guide, he doesn't want to bring a lure rod.
Yeah. And really what they're looking for, and I suppose for anybody like you said, if you're not living on the coast, it's somebody, a guide that can say, right, based on these conditions, these tides, this is where I'm going to bring you. And this is where your best chance is. Like Tom on Carb, you know where to bring the person for the best chance. But like Jason, you do salmon angling, trout angling, you know, freshwater. Would you say in terms of reading the conditions and understanding the conditions, the salt is another level altogether? Not to denigrate lakes or rivers or anything, but
yeah, no, I mean, no offense, but it's way harder, really. It's like anything. I mean, you know, you could go up during mayfly time or something and just hit it right and go out and catch loads of trout on a dry fly or something and think, oh, this is what's going to be like every May. And then you're in for a shock going forward, you know. But saltwater is worse because I'll give you a couple of factors. You know, tides, obviously. Another one is watercolor. I mean, I think I've been up fishing with Tom a fair few times at this stage, and I think maybe once ever I had really much bother with watercolor, and we probably still caught a couple of fish. And then you have floating weed. Salmon anglers can relate to it in kind of weather we've been getting now. Sometimes they get moss floating down. Every time they cast out to get a bit of moss on the line, fly gets covered in moss. Floating, you get the little bright green stuff, you get this brown scummy stuff. I mean, it just covers your leader. And then even from a fishing point of view, there might be a couple of feet of weed along the edge where you're wading. And if you don't get outside that, even with a line tray, if your line sort of falls into the water, you're not being careful, you're not making sure your line when you retrieve is on the line tray, you just look down and you'll see about 8 inches of this stuff and it just clings together. Guy goes to make a cast doesn't go, all the stuff's on the line, and then everything turns to mess, really. Or he lands a fish and the whole leader's covered in brown because he's excited. So yeah, I mean, there are things really you don't have to deal with. You know, if you're out in the lake, you have to find the fish. You're obviously, the hatch is a kind of a thing probably that's a little bit different. But you don't have to deal with the same changes in water levels during a session. So it'd be like, I suppose for me, it'd be like, you know, sometimes you go out in Corrib or something, you say, we go to Mask tomorrow. Mask is no, their window's wrong for Mask, so we'll go to Corrib. When you go to Corrib, no, there's weed floating everywhere here. And we go to whatever next, Cara. No, Cara, that's no good. Tide's wrong for Cara. So you know, it's not as, I mean, the marks, I could be going anywhere from Waterford to probably Middleton if I really had to, just to find suitable water sometimes, you know. So what it means most of the time is I'm off maybe 2 hours before I'm guiding, checking out conditions, you know, especially after a storm, you know, floods coming down the river, a lot of fresh water. The bay, say here in Dungarvan, it's fairly sandy, so the water could be like minimal visibility. And then you're talking like fly fishing. So then you say, well, look, what about going out the rocks? And you go out the rocks, the surf is so big that it's pretty much dangerous. Other times it's no wind, flat calm, and the whole place, everywhere you go, is just weed. And there's pretty much always somewhere to fish, but that's what your guide is there for, you know.
So we just get back. I mean, you're saying all the factors there, Jason. But like for me, the uninitiated, before we even get into that, what time of the year? For example, I know when people could come to the Western Lakes, or I could know when general people go grills fishing. But let's say, like, I'm thinking of taking up bass fishing. Can I go bass fly fishing in January?
I know you wouldn't. You'd be.
So
wait for the water to warm up.
Yeah, so you need the water to warm up for the fish to move into close to shore. So what months are you looking at then, Jason?
You're probably looking around April at the earliest, really, unless you want to fish for sea trout, which are not as really affected by the temperature. So you can certainly try for sea trout in February and March. And obviously, look, if you're living locally, you can go out. You get a couple of days of nice weather and you can go out. It's the same as, say, if you were going out in February in Corrib or Mask, and you'd say to me, look, don't bother coming up, it's freezing cold, it's not suitable, you know. But I look, scientifically, I'm not so blown away sometimes with the science, which are probably looking at something around 10 degrees water temperature, maybe. It's like all theory. Someone will say they won't feed below a certain temperature, and then some other will come along and say, well, I caught them 2 degrees lower, you know. So, but look, as a rough guide, and I suppose, looks, again, you think of salmon, water temperature's pretty big in terms of size of fly, depth you want to fish, all that kind of thing, whether the salmon are even active. So yeah, the water temperature, you're probably starting April, and then you can go right through. I've caught fish in December, but that's pretty rare.
Right.
Bass can be caught in other methods. you know, at other times like bait and but certainly for lures, flies, you're probably, if you're getting into November, once you defrost, I find
The window we're looking at here is April, October. That's really the window.
Pretty much, even sometimes May to October, I would say.
Right, fair enough.
How has it been actually this year? Because, like, you know, there was a lot of cold northeasterlies, wasn't there, coming in, like, you know, in was it May, I think, you know, so did that put the fishing down? Like, did it start later? Like,
no, I mean, it's not like, say, the lake or that. I mean, the wind doesn't generally seem to really affect the water temperature in the sea. It starts to rise and it generally either stops or continues to rise. You know, so if you're talking about even like this season from April on, with a lot of north wind, but where I'm based is a bit different. Like, I know, for example, one of the other guides in Wexford was saying like he was having desperate fishing, right? And he was lure fishing, and I imagine it was, you know, the wind and so on just didn't suit where he was fishing. But like down here in Dungarvan, the bay is a horseshoe. So, I mean, it's a horseshoe and it has 1.5 miles of a sand spit running across the middle of it. So there's always some side that's pretty sheltered. So you know, unless the water is so discolored that it's kind of impossible to fish, or the weather is so stormy that maybe you can't fish, you pretty much can fish. So for us, the Abbey side of Dungarvan, along towards there, you're familiar with kind of Clonea side, I suppose. You know, north wind, that's sheltered. You know, you get a south wind on the ring side, that's sheltered. You know, you get a west wind that's kind of going off the land a bit, so everywhere is fairly good. And yeah, you get probably the worst to be like a southeast, fairly fresh to strong southeast for fly fishing. You're fairly limited. And again, it can vary as well, because at low tide, there's a lot less water in the bay. You're only in the estuary, or looking at channels. They might be well fishable compared to, say, Mark, when it's full tide. You're looking at, like, on good springs, you're probably looking at a strip of 0.3 and high of 4 meters or more. So there's a big difference in height there, you know. So, you know, I could go drive down at full tide in the morning and look out and say, geez, there's white horses everywhere. I could go back at low tide and there's hardly a wave on it. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
Target the spring tides, isn't that your kind of best opportunity? Yeah,
I think there's more movement in the water. Low tide, fish are condensed into smaller areas because they're forced out. Certainly the middle two hours, or the middle third, if you like it. So it's a sort of a 6-hour change from low to high. There's a lot of movement in the water on the spring there. That seems to get the fish going. My friends then who are total believers in the solar theory, as it's called, the sun moon, and they'll say, oh, it'll be such an hour. I'm not as convinced with that one.
No, sorry, just explain. What are they saying? Is it to do with the phases of the moon, they're saying?
They call it the sun moon transit.
Right.
So it's this idea of the sun is going down and the moon is coming up at the same time.
Right.
And it's usually marked in your tide book, at the bottom of your tide book.
So you can have substance to it than horoscopes.
No, apparently. Apparently, I did look into it. Apparently, some guy got shellfish or crabs, I don't know, something like that, and he put them in tanks miles and miles and miles from the sea. And they were happy out inside in the tanks. But during that sun-moon transit, they all got active. So based on that, it's like everything in the sea gets active, or feeds or whatever, around that time. And even though these weren't even in this,
yeah, but it's a good sounding theory. I like it.
And all lads are totally convinced, and if they don't catch, they'll say, "Sure, it's the wrong hour." Now, look, if you're guiding,
I must remember that one.
Someone for
I like that one.
You know, so look, I wouldn't discount it. I mean, the guys who believe in it, a friend of mine, he's a scientist. He lectures science, and he's convinced, right? He's into lure fishing, and he's convinced. And again, obviously the spring tides go with moons, and whether it's a full moon or a new moon, so whether it's kind of bright at night or dark at night, again, lads will have a big thing. I think it definitely will affect night fishing, but that's the same if you're night fishing for sea trout if it's bright. You know, I would say some of the guys will come up with theories. I like the theories. I like listening to them. Like one of the lads fishes down Tremor side. He reckons if there's a moon, the fish come in the evening and they feed all night, sort of under the light of the moon or whatever. So when you come along the next day, fishing isn't great, kind of an idea. Whereas if there's no moon, he reckons the fish is better. I don't know. I mean, I can't say in the bay here that.
What do you prefer, Jason?
Proven to me, like.
What do you prefer, full or new moon?
I prefer fishing in the day and sleeping at night, Dara, to be honest.
Okay, fair enough, yeah.
But actually, is there much, because I know down in West Cork, the night fishing, it's getting more popular. Is it growing in popular? And tell me this theory in terms of, one of the theories is that because they're getting more wise, that it's getting harder to catch them during the day, and that's why kind of night fishing, you're seeing a kind of a growth in that, like.
There's probably a certain element of the amount of fishing they're getting, but down here, what I've seen, where they fish at night with the lures, it tends to be on beaches, shallow surf beaches.
Into the surf, is it like?
Yeah, and normally when it's flat calm at night, so I mean it's pretty calm when I'd see the lads down there. I've tried it with the fly, very, very poor success, which for me, I think, although you're hooking the fish in close with the lure, I think the fish are following it from a bit of a distance. And the same spots don't really fish during the day in the same conditions. So they won't fish unless you have a surf, because, as you said, the fish aren't going to swim into that shallow water. There's a load of people swimming, paddling, just those tourists are down. So, yeah, I would say conditions play a big part in it.
Actually, once more again, because we've been covering this, and as I said, the uninitiated, which is me, what are they feeding on?
Sure, could be all sorts. I mean, on those beaches, what you find is when you're coming up to low tide, when you wade out, and then when I say wade, you're probably walking out your knees. And about welly depth, if you've the lamp on, you'll see sand eels coming out from under your feet. Now, they tend to be small early season. They get a bit bigger as the year goes on. Like things, I suppose, like fry in the lake or whatever, they're getting bigger from after they hatch. But yeah, look, it's different in the estuary. We have a lot of sand in the estuary. They would be feeding, I would say, a lot on shrimp, crabs. Generally, like I always ask any of the lads that I know to keep fish now, I always ask them what was in the fish. And one guy last year, it was fairly interesting. He fished the same spot 3 evenings in a row. And he caught fish every evening, but he kept one each evening. So, of course, I was talking to him then and I said, well, you know what did you keep him? What were they feeding on? The first evening, the bass he kept had all sand eels. The second evening, the bass he caught had one sand eel and the rest were all small green crabs, like the size, a bit bigger than a €2 coin. Hardback crabs, not peelers like we think as anglers, you know what I mean? He caught all those fish in the cover close to him, in around rough ground, we'll say, weeds, rock, that kind of stuff. The third evening, exact same mark, right? Same set of tides. He caught one fish and he caught the fish at distance and the fish had nothing but shrimp in it.
And were the conditions the same each evening?
Well, I mean, the tide was slightly later. The conditions were exactly the same. So that made total sense to me because it was coming to the end of the season and we might call it the sand eel spawning run was coming to an end. So he probably just caught the last bit of that, the first evening. The bass obviously still followed the same route. The sand eels weren't there. So they said, well, look, there's crabs. We've been nosing around. The third evening, for whatever reason, the fish stayed out in the channel. So he was casting into a channel and that's where the shrimps were. You know, and that was my second question, apart from where they were feeding on, is how far out did you catch them? So once he started telling me they were all different food items, I was saying, well, you know, well, did you hook them all the same distance? And I knew that mark very well. I've seen it at low tide, we'll say, when you can kind of walk around it. And it made perfect sense to me. In close, there was cover, rock and kelp. That's where you hooked the fish that were feeding on the crabs. Then he hooked the fish on the sand outside that when they were on the sand eels. And then he hooked the fish on the shrimp in the channel at distance. He caught them all on the same lure.
Right. That's interesting now.
Yeah, he caught them all on the same lure.
Hmm.
There was another friend of mine fishing that mark the next set of tides. And I said to him, put on a fly teaser, like a dropper. You'd say, Tom, fly fishing.
Yeah.
A dropper. So the two lads arrived down. Your man was back again. He'd been having success. Another friend of mine went down as well. Two of them were there. The lad with the fly teaser, I think, had 9 bass landed. Now, he doesn't keep any fish, so it was not, he was catching and releasing them. The other guy who'd been fishing it all the time, I think he had 2 on the lure. But the guy with the teaser had 9, and I think 7 of the 9, or most of them anyway, were on the fly.
Right.
And I would hazard a guess, because they hooked all the fish at distance, that the fish were on shrimp.
Right.
And you think about it, a big 130 centimeter hard lure probably doesn't look much like a 3-inch shrimp. There's a food item, do you know what I mean? It's aggression. If you're out in the lake and they're feeding on whatever, and you pull a minky or a big streamer or something across a fish, you might still have a go. But this smaller mobile fly with the movement obviously was more shrimpy to the fish, and he caught more fish on it.
To be honest with you, actually, the more I listen to this now, as I said, because I haven't done any, I have done bass fishing once, but they sound very much like trout in a lot of respects.
I think there's a good crossover if you understand it. You know what I mean? If you have good knowledge. And it's funny, like the trout anglers that I take out have confidence. That last week or so I had I'm sure you won't mind me mentioning Dan O'Neill from Mount Juliet, and a friend of his were out with me. And I knew there was going to be a bit of action around full tide, because it was the 3rd day in a row I was out. It was kind of the same every day, and conditions were the same. So we kind of said we'd put in a couple of hours trying for a big fish. And then we'd target the schoolies, because I knew the schoolies would flat calm, really warm. They start showing themselves around full tide. Turning the tide, then the weed was going to get deposited on the shore. So a place that you couldn't fish an hour earlier because there'd be weed floating everywhere, all that weed would be kind of washed up and you could fish it now. So we went along, we fished. We saw a few fish swirling, good sized fish, didn't hit anything. The lads never lost confidence. That was the funny thing.
Yeah.
No, they never lost confidence. And eventually they had, I don't know, they both had fish. Dan's friend probably hooked more fish. But that was really interesting for me, that, they could sort of understand what I was saying. That there'd be more trout anglers I'd expect than salmon anglers. They've done a little bit of pike fishing as well, which is interesting too. From the tackle side of it, lads who are into pike fishing, that's handy. They can cast, they've used heavier, like 8 or 9 weight rods. But we've a kind of a funny system down here, because we have flats inside in the bay, loads and loads of flats with sand and really clear water, and it's not particularly deep. So it's more like bone fishing. You can see the fish some of the times. And then obviously, if you're fishing, if you're casting into probably not much more than waist deep water, so it's a couple of feet, we use 6 weights a lot of the time. And a 6 weight for the shallow clear water, and then we bring an 8 or a 9 weight for the likes of channels and places where there's either current or wind or rough ground. So you're not worried about spooking a fish. You're probably hoping to catch, your larger fish. Now,
what lines are you on then?
You're just using a standard weight forward on the trout rod, we'll call it. 9 foot 6 weight. You might pick up mullet, so it allows you to fish lighter tippet. I say lighter, like 8 or 10 pound, which is probably in X is probably about 1X, wouldn't it? 1X, maybe 2X at most.
In around there.
So,
and are you on a floating line?
Yeah, in the shallows, we'd pretty much be on a floating line.
Right, and that's on your let's say your 9 foot 6 weight setup, and you're using tippet of between 1X to 2X, 10 to 8 pounds.
Yeah, you might taper it a bit, or you might fish 2 flies as well. You hedge your bets a bit. So very like trout fishing. very like trout fishing. Then your other outfit, you're fishing probably most of the time in intermediate, cold water, like an outbound short. I find that's probably where it's worth investing in, an actual saltwater rod. If somebody has an old 9'6" weight lying around, which most of us that trout fishing that we don't use anymore, it's not designed for the salt, but if you mind it and you wash it, you get a good bit of time. And if it's just left in the shed, it's not being used, what's wrong with, taking it out and using it? And, again, I would say to lads, a cheap reel, plastic, can't rust too easy. And like I have one there, I have a 9'6" weight there, an old one that I sometimes give lads for guiding, and I must have 15 years and I can't see anything on it. But we don't throw it into the salt water. We don't submerge it. We don't use it as a wading stick. We don't, leave it in a mound of sand. So if you're careful and you wash it down and you're not dunking it in the water, it'll be fine. I wash all the stuff down when I come home, which again is a bit of an ordeal. People forget when you're out guiding them. It's a bit like maybe, say, Tom getting the boat ready or tidying up the boat when everybody's gone. You have to wash down all your stuff, dry it off. Then when it's dried off, I spray it with a silicone spray. That helps a bit for the next trip.
I just wanted to go in there, Jason, because what I always strikes me, and Tom, I don't know your thoughts on it as well, is from talking to yourself and other guides, is because the coastline and there's so many marks, and as you mentioned before, the conditions, is how much time it takes, in terms of understanding the marks and, blank days. And you really have to put in the hours, don't you, to really know the marks?
Yeah, I mean, when I decided I was kind of really getting into the guiding part of it in the salt water, and it was a bit because salmon fishing was getting bad. And funny, salmon fishing, I hope salmon anglers don't mind me saying this too much, but salmon fishing was getting worse, but it wasn't getting any cheaper, right? And I always laugh, but now I'm always say this to people: if you take a guy who's starting off tomorrow wants to go salmon fishing, I take myself, right? I'm in a couple of clubs down here. €100 for an All Ireland license. I'm in a lake club, it's about 220. I'm in another river club, that's around 220. So I wouldn't see 600 or more going fairly quickly. Now, if you walk into your local tackle shop and you say, I want a pair of waders, a cheap rod reel line, and if you think your first 2 seasons, that's 1,200 minimum the salmon guy has spent before you get a rod, a reel, a line, waders. So lads be saying to me, look, your man over there with the lower rod, Sims waders, top of the range, such and such a low. It's like golf. He has no green fees. It's free fishing.
Yeah.
It's free fishing. You just go fish. But yeah, going back to your question, time. But what I did, I went down at low tide and I fished it all the ways in and all the ways out. Pick a sort of an area, and we go there and you fish that. Start at low tide, all the ways in, all the ways out, and you do it for maybe a week, and you try and get different wind, different conditions. I should have wrote it down, I suppose, but look, when you're living local and everything, it's easier. You kind of remember it. But again, you compare, like some people say to me, like, oh, there was a few tourists over with low rods, and they got all these bass and all. I said, how many rods? There was 5 of them. How many days did they fish? 7. 5 rods, 7 days. How many hours a day? Oh, I saw them here. They only slept for about 6 hours. They fished most of the rest of the time.
Yeah.
So, if you had a bit of common sense about you fished a good bit, and you went out in Corrib, weather wasn't too bad that it was hindering you too much, and you took out 3 or 4 boats, and you had a plan, and you spread out, and you fished all the tactics and all the methods for that many days, you probably get fish. And you probably learn hotspots, and different things for those same conditions again. So that's the effort.
So
you're
with
talking
regards to marks and the hotspots, and I have heard of things, can they be overfished though?
If you're killing the fish, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, particularly certain estuaries like where bass seem to come right up into an estuary.
Yeah.
There's probably the same couple of fish coming up, and sometimes they're really big. I mean, I've seen some big fish caught down here in kind of unlikely places, probably because they don't get fished that much. But what I've noticed is someone gets a big fish, and if they parade it about too much, the next time you pass that mark, there's a lot of lads fishing. And if a lot of them are killing fish, it is going to have an effect. Like they're quite slow growing fish.
Obviously, as in a lot of forms of sea angling, there's quite a few sea anglers out there who like to keep what they catch. So
yeah, no, look, I've nothing. I mean, I've kept plenty of fish in my time too. I don't want people thinking that I'm sort of a mad catch and release, don't kill a fish sort of a thing. It's not the case. It's just most of the guys I have out are fly fishing guys, and they generally aren't that. They're more in it for, I will say, the sport side of it than the eating fish side of it. And if a fella catches a couple of fish, if he catches 5 or 6 fish, and they're a good sort of eating size, like if you had a fish probably around 50, 55 centimeters, you want to keep one of them, that'd be a nice fish, and they're sort of a shoal size fish. I mean, if he gets a fish over 70 centimeters, which could be, we had 2 fish so far this year around 62, 64 centimeters, which I think is around 6.5 pounds probably. You're getting on the wrong side of eating fish. The way I explain it to people is, if you can have a choice of lamb or ram, as with the case with most of the meats and fishes, I suppose, the really big ones aren't.
They're quite old as well, though, Jason, aren't they?
They'd be really old, yeah. And you can take scale samples. I've done all that stuff before.
You can go to 12, 13, 14 years, can they?
More. I think I had one. Was 17 plus years. They put in a plus because there was some damage to the scales, maybe a seal or a net. They weren't sure. So there was a bit of damage. So they couldn't. They sent me a little report, and they couldn't be exact, trying to count the rings on the scale or whatever. But yeah, I suppose I was really intrigued with all that, and I'm sure you guys are. But then I got to a stage where it's tough fishing. So really, I put a lot of effort into the fishing side of it. And I don't, it's just easier when people contact me. I say, look, you're unlikely to be keeping a fish, and some fella rings me. I've one group coming later on this year who are into lure fishing, but they're coming from abroad. I don't think they'll be fishing too much. I'm pretty sure they won't keep any fish from what I've gathered. Not too pushed, but any one, I'm sure Darren knows the lads in Cork, and I know 1 or 2 of the chaps around Wexford. They don't really want to be bringing people to show marks if they think they're just going to go in and kill everything.
Understandable.
And also if you're likely to come back on your own.
Yeah, but
that's another thing as well, isn't it?
It is. And look, the thing is, I've had lads who have come back on their own, and I've seen them. And what happens is, in a day, say from low water to high, you'd be doing well to fish 3 spots. Most likely you get to fish 2 spots. And out of those,
are you serious? Sorry, are you serious? Like, so if you had a day and you're going out in that day, 3 spots are probably 3 marks, I'm presuming, would be the maximum you could fish. Yeah, so most probably 2.
Well, like if you're giving yourself 2 hours roughly per mark, so if you're going, say, for the last 2 hours of the tide going out, then you have to drive to another mark. Most likely what will happen, the tide will turn, and as it pushes, it's going to cause a lot of weed and dirt in the water. So you have to get out of there. Then you're going to have to go to, say that's an estuary mark. Then you have to go to either another estuary mark or maybe a rock mark for 2 hours. Then the flow is going to go out of that. So you might have another spot that just tends to fish well at high water when there's not much current, just kind of fish hole there. And you get maybe an hour and a bit after high. So, if you're starting at 10 o'clock and it's high at 6 and you're fishing until 7 or 8, that's, you're between travel and setting up and putting on waders and maybe walking and all that. You're doing well to get sort of out of 8 hours, 3 kind of 2-hour blocks. Now, there are times you might just go to one spot because the conditions are right and you could just stay there. But that spot could be a mile long, of rocks and
Right.
up and
So there's a
down
lot
and
of options in it.
all that sort of thing. So yeah, it could be just good ground with a lot of rocks, a lot of gullies, and the fish are moving up and down it. So as a guide, you might say, look at this height of tide, this spot here is good, and then an hour later they tend to be over there. But that won't stop the customers, moving up and down and trying to intercept the fish.
Can I ask you, Jason? Just as we're wrapping on this, you mentioned the overseas anglers, and I've heard Ireland described as a bass mecca before. Is it seen like that from kind of international anglers' views that if you want to catch the bass, come to Ireland and the south coast especially?
I follow a lot of the stuff on social media, and certainly the Netherlands, they seem to have some great bass fishing in particular. No, I mean, look, it's guys in Europe and that who are into bass fishing or fly fishing for bass, they'll travel around like any of us to different locations. I think probably maybe the UK, there's probably a lot of places maybe where the fish aren't as big, or they don't get as many big fish on lures, and certainly on flies maybe. They certainly seem to do well down in Wales from what I've seen. So no, look, again, we had 2 weeks ago, we had a good 3 days. I think I had a man and his wife, and then I had a different chap for one of the days. And I think for the 3 days, we had 27 bass, and it was all fly fishing. And like I said, 2 were over 60 centimeters. But that was 3 days with a guide, 2 people fishing 2 of the days, one the third day, very, very competent anglers. One had a good bit of experience bass fishing. The other fella had a good bit of experience saltwater fishing. I brought my son off yesterday for an hour. He went down with a spinning rod, and we got nothing. So, and then we only went for an hour, and he's not big into fishing. He's more into his GAA, but people would think, oh, Sir Jason, just bring the young fella down and catch a fish. It's not that easy, but certainly, look, social media, it's the same with salmon. You see it. Oh, Namaya's teaming with him. Then next week, the Blackwater's teaming with him. Or, that Tom probably sees the same with the lakes. The mayfly is up. We were out, I think, on mask pretty early at olive time, Tom. We saw one mayfly.
Up then.
We saw one, yeah. So, we take a picture of that and put it on Facebook, and lads will be tying mayflies to beat the band.
Yeah. It's only the good times or the positive vibes that kind of that stick with people. Tell me this, Jason, just looking to the rest of the summer then, July, August, are they the kind of peak months now, in terms of people looking to catch a bass on the fly?
I think they're good months. I think any time from May, if the weather is good, particularly like hot, calm, any time from May through to end of July is good for numbers of fish. Tend to have a lot of schooling fish around. I think if you're after big fish, probably late September, October, even maybe November. But what I notice is the number of fish caught falls, and you might fish 2 or 3 days for one fish, but it could be a really good fish when you get to the real end of the season. So yeah, look, it depends what people are sort of trying to target. But I know the last 2 sessions I was out, the lads, when they were using the 6 weights and probably using 1x, maybe even 0x, and both times the lads broke in fish.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So, they were catching smaller schooly fish, and then instantly from the fella's voice, like he's like, whoa, excitement just goes through the roof, big fish. And unfortunately, they're the bigger fish. It's a thing people don't understand. Bass have real leathery mouths, and they take off like steam trains. So if you're coming from a salmon background and you adjust your drag on your reel as if you're going to, a salmon takes and goes, what will happen if that's a big bass? You're swinging the fly in a current or something, it comes around, big bass takes it, man sets the hook, and you just hear the reel singing and all the line going out. And by the time he gets back in touch, that bass is wrapped around something pretty nasty and he's not getting them. And then the same, really, a lot of trout lads, because I think they're used to fishing with lighter tippet, You know, if you've probably had done a bit of streamer fishing, maybe lure fishing in the lakes early season, you know, Tom again did know this, you know, you could fish pretty heavy tippet and fish aren't too fussy. Bass in general, when you're using big flies anyway, like I would probably a lot of the time be using maybe 7-8 feet of, I don't know what X, because it's more like spinning fluorocarbon, but it'd be like 18 pounds straight through. So you could be using, or sometimes if it's windy, you might be tapering the line a bit more. But like it wouldn't bother me to have, you know, like 25 pounds, 4 feet, 3 or 4 feet of 20 pounds, and just a loop knot onto the fly. I would not be one bit worried about, you know, the
They're
lead.
not leader shot.
No,
No,
and a lot
no.
of conditions. But if
Yeah.
you're fishing very clear, shallow water, a lot of mullet, and you know, you're likely to be spooking fish, then I think you're increasing your chances by scaling down.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I think panic sets in when you hit the bigger fish. I've over the last few years, I mean, one chap from Cork, I know he had a fish around 7 pounds on a 7 weight. I had a chap from South Africa, and he actually had 2 pretty big fish on. I mean, it looked like one of those rods you go in, again, no disrespect, and like into Lidl or one of these places, you know, the kits you get for the kids. He tightened the drag up full because that was the advice he was given, and it was like a seesaw, really. I mean, fish would try and run, and he was having trouble getting line off the reel, and your man would sort of lean forward on the rock, and then the fish would come towards him, but he got the fish in. If he left that fish run, he wasn't going to get that fish. And I would say the same with lads lure fish, and I know you've done a bit of flying lure dart for bass as well. And I mean, if you have that drag set light and you hit a really big fish, you're not going to get him.
Final question, Jason. We ask it to everyone. What was your most memorable fish? Bass.
Bass, yeah, that's a good question. Don't say fish, because look, I'd fish for anything, as you guys know. Probably fish for goldfish inside in the bowl if you left me, but probably, yeah, it's an unusual one. And actually, Dara, I think you were with me, believe it or not. We were fishing a particular mark, and we went in the dark. So we got there in the dark before daylight. Partly because I wanted to get a bit of fishing in before anyone else was out of bed, and saw this really, like we say, specific spot where we were. And I got a really good fish. And I took him around the corner a little bit away, not to disturb anything and not to be seen. So I had this great idea. I had one of these red LED head torches. And I said, sure, you know, I'll turn on the red light. People won't take any notice if they can see me. And, you know, got out the phone and I measured the fish. And if it's a big fish, I think afterwards it would have been about 12.5 pounds off of the centimeters when I converted it. The picture was a disaster. All I could see was this sort of red spotlight, and you could really see 1/3 of the fish pretty well where the red beam was. And then the top and the tail and some of the head was quite blurry. Now look, you could probably make out that it was a big fish, but like, oh my God, what a disaster. But look, anyone who fishes with me probably knows I've no interest in, I only take the pictures, I take them on my phone, I've no proper camera, I've no interest in it. I just want it as a sort of a record, if you like. I need a certain bit of it for social media, as a bit of promotion. You know, I don't like holding the fish anymore in the pictures myself, even in the lake. You know, if I was out with Tom, I'd usually say just take a picture of him in the net or on the seat. I went through that phase where I wanted to be holding him, you know, with the arms outstretched in every picture. And look, again, I'll be honest, I went through a phase when I was younger and couldn't catch enough fish. And if I was allowed to keep 6 fish, I'd keep 6 fish. And if they said you were allowed to keep 4 fish, I'd keep 4 fish. But now I don't, it just don't bother, you know. Maybe everybody goes through that phase. Maybe I'm getting old. Really don't like keeping wild fish anymore. You know,
Would that have been your best one, Jason?
I'd say 12 and a half. You know, I've been out with guys. I was out with a guy. We all call him Finbar. He's a lad from Tyrone. He was lure fishing. He came down from Strabane. He was actually down the last 2 days now, but I wasn't fishing with him. He was salmon fishing. He had 2 fish around 80 centimeters in one session.
Right. What would they? 80 centimeters. What that? What's
be
that work out?
doubles anyway. I expect they'd be over 10, like 82 and maybe 84. And he caught the two of them into one session, and he caught the both of them off the surface.
Jesus. Wow.
You know, on the poppers.
Right.
So, like, you should be just saying to yourself, you know, not being lucky, you know, or obviously, look, I'm not saying there was no skill there, but to catch two big fish in one session, you know, in the middle of the day, bright sunshine on a surface lure. I mean, you know, but that does throw what you said there out the window a bit about the night. I mean, maybe you have a better chance. Do you know what I mean? Tricky with lures, fishing at night, you know, and you're not like, but I remember years ago, I mean, Tom would know a guy there, John O'Brien, he runs a tackle shop in Waterford. I mean, he's a extremely good sea angler, shore angler, you know, international medals, all that. I remember one time John saying to me, it was like heat wave type conditions. Kind of conditions, if I mention them going up the car of our mast, they appear just out of nowhere.
Out of the blue. Suddenly transpired.
And John just looked at me and I said, John, geez, I'm going, you know what you think? And he said, sure, you know yourself, Jay, just go to a current, an estuary channel, and there's X many knots, you know, 12, 18 knots of water flowing, and you have anywhere between 8 and 20 feet depth. I don't think they're that pushed out the sun. You know what I mean? The food's all moving around. Now, like I say, if you go down to a rock mark out in the Copper Coast in those same conditions, and you think you're going to stand there waving a fly rod around, and Mr. Big Bass is going to sit there waiting for you, it won't happen too often.
I always say, the more you practice, the luckier you get, you know, and it always comes back to putting the time in, you know, and especially like, but I also think that's kind of where if you live near or near enough like that, you have to put that time in. Whereas if you're kind of maybe looking at bass, as I do, kind of maybe just on the summer months, that's where you need the guide to say, right, we're going here. This is what we're doing. And, you know, away you go. Like,
yeah. And every type of fishing, you know, people often say about me being kind of an all-round angler. You know, I fish for a lot of different things. It all helps. You all help each other. You know, that's a definite. I mean, remember being on Corb the first time we fished the deeps, and Tom said about mackerelizing. I looked at him and said, what's he on about mackerel? In the middle of Loch Corb, he's finally gone mad, you know.
Finally.
And then I saw what he was on about, and straight away I said, nervous water. So we would call that saltwater fishing nervous water, where bait fish are, or something, or just, it's a disturbance that you see. It looks out of place. And once he said it, I knew. And I mean, that crossover for me, I knew what I was looking for. A friend of ours, Dave, was in the boat. Dave hadn't seen that before, so he didn't really know at the time what he was looking for. It took him more time. Whereas instantly I knew what he was looking for, you know. So all that sort of stuff, you know, like I say, salmon anglers will understand certain stuff straight away when they come. If they're fishing in currents where you're swinging a fly, they get it straight away, because it's just like fishing in a river. Your trout anglers, when you're fishing with the 6 weights and you're wading around and trying to be stalking fish and that, they'll get it straight away. Your pike anglers, I often have this conversation, again, it's a theory, about sometimes the big fish are full and I think they're digesting. And a lot of the lads I talk to that are into fishing for pike and catch big pike, they say the same thing, that there are periods when the fish just seem to switch off and they're probably full. You know, and you're talking about digesting crabs with shells on them and shrimps, and it must take it, you know, when, and you're funny, when you see the sprats late season or the bigger sand eels, fish do seem to fish more longer periods. They're feeding for longer periods, probably because, I mean, they probably eat those sand eels and a few hours later they're gone through them, like, whereas, you know, certain food items probably don't digest as quickly. Like, I don't know about in the lake. You know, I often wonder in the lake when early season, when they're feeding on small fish, you know, shrimp, hoglouse, that kind of stuff. Apart from the temperature and the time of year, I just wonder, is that window? Because there seems to be a window, and we experienced that very early this year, I think, on Mask, where there's a window where the fish start to feed, and they're not feeding before that, and they're switched off after that. And I think, you know, it's funny, as obviously the temperature goes up, but once you get fly hatches, they seem to feed for longer periods, up until you get real heat. And there's a lot of crossover between, what I'd be doing in the salt and what I see in other types of fishing. So look, if anybody's done, river fishing or salmon fishing with a fly rod, they'll see things when they're out fishing that sort of makes sense to them.
I hope people kind of get an idea, maybe either just a taster of it, but also kind of maybe understand that we're only really scratching the surface here in terms of, the conditions, the food, even what is it? The sun moon transit, if you want to go into that, the horoscope, whatever, however far, but there, like I said, we're only scratching the surface on this, and definitely something we'll might come back to later in the year, just to kind of maybe delve a little bit deeper into the mysteries of the salt, I think, as we call it. Jason O'Riordan, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, lads.
Our thanks to Jason O'Riordan for joining us on the show. And don't forget to rate, review, and follow the Ireland on the Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Plus, you can keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com, as well as on Instagram, and myself and Tom will be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.